They loved you with urgency, promised you were special, and then, without warning, they pulled away, cold, unreachable. You search for the moment it all changed but can't find it. Only the echo remains. You were idealized, then discarded, and worst of all, no one else saw it happen. So you start to wonder, was it really abuse, or am I just overreacting? But what if you're asking the wrong question? What if the one who hurt you wasn't a monster, but a mirror? We all know the names by now. The narcissist, obsessed with admiration. The Machiavellian, always 2 steps ahead. The psychopath, charming but hollow. Psychology groups them together as the Dark Triad. 3 distinct personality styles, bound by emotional coldness and manipulation. But here's what no one tells you. These aren't just traits found in them. They are patterns that live quietly in all of us. That's not a condemnation, it's an invitation. Carl Jung believed that the darkness we fear in others is often a projection of what we've refused to see in ourselves. He called this repressed part of the psyche the shadow, the part of us made up of everything we've denied, disowned, or forgotten. Not just the shame and rage, but the raw need, the ache for control, the hunger to be seen, even at someone else's expense. The shadow isn't evil, it's exiled. And when we don't make it conscious, it rules our lives from behind the curtain. You felt it, the impulse to twist the truth slightly to get what you want. The subtle satisfaction when someone who once ignored you now seeks your approval. The withdrawal of empathy when it becomes inconvenient. These are not rare, they are human. But when left unchecked, when repeated and defended, they become pathological. That's what makes the Dark Triad so terrifying. Not that it exists in others, but that it's a distortion of needs we all share. And that's why you were drawn to them. Not because you're broken, but because you recognize something familiar, something buried. The psychologist Erich Neumann, a student of Jung, wrote that we are magnetically drawn to the parts of ourselves we've disowned. We mistake them for attraction, for fate, for chemistry, but really it's a call to remember what we've forgotten. You were pulled toward the narcissist not because they loved you, but because they mirrored the part of you still seeking external proof of worth. The Machiavellian's emotional detachment felt safe because it echoed the part of you that learned vulnerability was dangerous. The psychopath's coolness fascinated you because it reminded you of the survival strategy you abandoned. But here's the danger. When we run from our own shadow, we give our power to those who embody it, and we do this unconsciously. That's what fairy tales are for, to warn us. In the story of Bluebeard, a woman marries a mysterious man who gives her keys to every room in his castle, except one. Of course, she opens the forbidden door. Inside, she finds the corpses of his former wives. The key stains with blood and cannot be cleaned. The truth has been seen, and once seen, cannot be unseen. This is what it's like to encounter the shadow. It stains you, not in guilt, but in clarity. You start seeing patterns in them, in yourself, and the world you once called safe begins to unravel. But this unraveling is not the end. It's the beginning. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. You're not cursed, you're being called. Called to stop chasing light that blinds. Called to stop fearing darkness that's misunderstood. Called to recognize that the people who hurt you most might have only been revealing the very parts of yourself still waiting to be healed. So before we pathologize others, we must turn inward, because the shadow doesn't disappear, it waits. And it speaks. And when it's ignored, it doesn't whisper, it seduces, it repeats, it finds its way into every room we pretend we've locked. And yet, that's not the end of the story. The one who sees the shadow clearly isn't doomed. They're free. And this is where our descent begins, not to demonize the Dark Triad, but to meet it with eyes open, with language honest, and with the power to say, I see you, and I am no longer afraid to see myself. Before we learned words, we learned performance. The child cries and sees which cries are met with tenderness and which are punished. The smile becomes a currency. The silence becomes armor. The truth becomes filtered through what keeps us safe. And from those early calculations we begin to build it, the mask. Carl Jung called it the persona, the image we craft for the world, not to deceive, but to belong. It's the polite voice at work, the curated post, the agreement we make to trade a little authenticity for a little approval. But there's a cost. What doesn't fit the persona, what's too intense, too needy, too angry, too strange, gets pushed into the dark, into the shadow. And while the persona is praised, the shadow waits. The shadow is not just the shame we carry, it's the part of us that remembers how we survived, the emotions we weren't allowed to feel, the instincts we were told to tame, the voice that once said no and was punished for it. And if this all stayed in theory, it might be manageable. But the shadow doesn't just live in your unconscious, it speaks through projection. Have you ever met someone and immediately disliked them without knowing why? Ever judge someone harshly for something you secretly fear in yourself? That's not intuition. That's the shadow trying to show you what you've disowned. We say we hate arrogance, but we secretly crave recognition. We resent manipulation, but we lie when the truth feels too vulnerable. We pity the cold-hearted, but we numb ourselves every time we feel too much. This isn't hypocrisy, it's fragmentation. And the wider the gap between our persona and our shadow, the more unstable we become. We start living double lives: public compassion, private resentment, public joy, private despair, public wisdom, private control. It's no surprise then that the Dark Triad traits often emerge not in villains but in those who've perfected the mask. Dr. Jekyll was respectable, refined, admired, but he split himself in two to keep that image intact. And the more he repressed, the more powerful Mr. Hyde became, until the mask couldn't hold. This is the danger of disowning the shadow. It doesn't go away, it festers, and eventually it erupts, not as growth but as chaos. And it's not just literature, it's you, it's me. It's the empath who becomes controlling under the guise of care, the spiritual seeker who denies anger but breeds passive aggression, the partner who avoids conflict but manipulates through guilt. Not because they're cruel, but because they're fragmented. Jung warned, the shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. To face it is not just about insight, it's about transformation. That transformation starts with a question: what part of me have I made unlovable? Because whatever you've cast out, your anger, your ambition, your longing, is not dead, it's underground. It will come back either as possession or power. And here's the paradox. The more you suppress your darkness, the more it controls you. But the more you face it, the more it integrates, and the less you fear it in others. There's a reason you attract certain patterns. It's not because you're cursed, it's because your shadow is asking to be seen. So look, not to shame yourself, but to find what you left behind. The fire, the voice, the boundaries, the truth. This isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the mask. Not all wounds look like blood. Some look like applause. Some wear suits. Some hold eye contact too long, too hard. Some offer love, but only when it benefits them. You've met them. We all have. The narcissist, the manipulator, the emotionally vacant. But what if they weren't just personalities? What if they were masks, crafted not for deception, but for survival? The Dark Triad, as psychology calls it, is made of three traits: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. But behind these clinical terms are deeper truths. Archetypes, patterns, shields worn by people whose shadows have taken the throne. Carl Jung taught that the shadow is not some abstract darkness, it is the unwanted self, the exiled instincts, the pain we buried so deeply we forgot it was ever ours. And when the shadow goes unclaimed, it begins to act in ways that look like personality. But they are more than that. They are rehearsals of trauma. And the triad is the script. The narcissist wears the crown. They appear magnetic, commanding, hungry for admiration. But beneath that gold-leafed facade is a void they've never dared to enter. They are not full of self. They are starved for it. Their entire identity is a wall against annihilation. What they call confidence is a fortress of fragility. And when you no longer feed their image, they turn, not because they hate you, but because they can't afford to be reminded that the mask is paper thin. Then there is the cloak, the strategist, the one who always seems 3 moves ahead. Machiavellianism isn't just manipulation, it's the cold art of survival. This person doesn't just play games, they believe life is won. They learned early that openness invites betrayal, that truth is a weapon best kept sheathed. They wear detachment like armor and speak with precision because emotion is a language they were punished for using. But don't mistake distance for power. Their cynicism was once idealism, betrayed, dismissed, or crushed. The cloak hides a child who needed someone to be reliable and instead found advantage dressed as affection. And then there is the knife, the one who feels nothing. Not sadness, not joy, just silence. This is the realm of the subclinical psychopath, not the killer from fiction, but the person who walks through your heart without leaving footprints. They mimic what love looks like, but not what it feels like. They are not calculating, they are severed. Feeling, once unbearable, was amputated. And now, all that's left is the performance of humanity. These 3, crown, cloak, knife, are not just types. They are consequences, not of evil, but of disconnection from the self. They are personas built in the ruins of the unloved child, the unprotected heart, the soul that learned early that being real was too dangerous. And here's the haunting part. They are not alien to you. Have you ever exaggerated your story so you'd feel admired? Ever withheld truth to maintain control? Ever gone numb when things got too painful to process? The difference between pathology and humanity is not absence of darkness, it's awareness of it. Carl Jung said, when an inner situation is not made conscious, it appears outside as fate. You don't need to become a narcissist to attract one, you only need to deny the part of yourself still hungry for praise. You don't need to be Machiavellian to be manipulated by one. You only need to suppress your own instinct for strategy. You don't need to be psychopathic to feel drawn to their certainty. You only need to be tired of your own emotional chaos. And when that denial persists, you don't just tolerate these traits, you seek them, not because you want to suffer, but because your unconscious is trying to show you what's been lost. In The Secret Sharer, Joseph Conrad tells of a young ship captain who discovers a fugitive hiding aboard. This fugitive is his double, a literal shadow, a man who killed out of necessity and now seeks escape. The captain protects him, not out of duty, but because he sees himself. By the end, the fugitive vanishes, but the captain remains, transformed. Not because he was innocent, but because he integrated what he once feared. This is what the Dark Triad offers us, not an enemy to exile, but a mirror to hold. The narcissist shows you your need to be recognized. The Machiavellian reveals your fear of vulnerability. The psychopath exposes your buried numbness, the place where your feelings once lived. If you see only a monster, you miss the message. But when you look deeper, you begin to reclaim what you abandoned to survive. And what was once manipulation becomes strategy rooted in truth. What was once grandiosity becomes the courage to claim your value. What was once numbness becomes discernment, who to open to and who not to. You cannot destroy the shadow, but you can give it form, you can give it voice. And when you do, you are no longer ruled by masks. You are ruled by meaning, and that is the beginning of transformation. We expect evil to look dramatic, explosive, horrifying. We imagine sharp teeth, bloodied hands, a villain in the dark. But sometimes evil looks like silence, like paperwork, like indifference. When Hannah Arendt covered the trial of Adolf Eichmann, a man who orchestrated logistics for the Holocaust, she expected to witness a monster. Instead, she saw a bureaucrat, mild-mannered, orderly, not insane, just ordinary. She called it the banality of evil, the terrifying realization that great harm doesn't always come from twisted souls. Sometimes it comes from empty ones. And this is where the Dark Triad reveals its most disturbing truth. Not all narcissists are loud. Not all manipulators are dramatic. Not all psychopaths are obvious. Sometimes they're helpful, accomplished, polished. Sometimes they're you, not in the clinical sense, but in moments, in fragments, in shadows. You've ignored someone's pain because it was inconvenient. You've reshaped a story to gain sympathy. You've gone cold when staying open felt too dangerous. This doesn't make you a monster, it makes you human, but only if you're willing to see it. Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But most of us never get that far. We see cruelty and call it other, we see manipulation and call it evil, but we forget that the moment we stop owning our capacity for harm, we become its passive channel. There's a reason so many empathic people end up in relationships with narcissists. It's not weakness, it's projection. The empath often disowns their own need for recognition. So when someone shows up demanding praise, they comply because they've forgotten that part of themselves. There's a reason idealists fall for Machiavellians. The part of them that wants control, wants to be smart, calculating, sharp, is buried under years of shame. So when they meet someone who owns it unapologetically, they feel chemistry. But that chemistry is actually confrontation with the part of themselves they rejected. And the most dangerous of all, those who don't feel anything, the ones who leave without goodbye, who smile at your suffering, who never raise their voice because they don't feel enough to scream. If you've never made peace with your own numbness, if you've never grieved the moment you shut your heart to survive, then that emptiness in someone else might feel strangely safe, familiar, like home. But here's the paradox. The more we run from our own darkness, the more drawn we are to people who embody it. Not because we want pain, but because we want closure. We want the parts of ourselves we lost to be returned, even if it comes through destruction. So we end up in patterns, loving people who can't love, giving to those who only take, worshipping strength that is actually avoidance, and calling it fate, but it's not fate. It's the shadow. What you deny in yourself, you will serve in others. What you suppress, you will project. What you refuse to meet, you will repeat. And that's how evil becomes banal, not through malice, through blindness. You don't have to be cruel to perpetuate cruelty. You only have to look away from them, from yourself, from the voice inside that whispers, "This isn't who I am," and the deeper voice that replies, "Then why do you keep choosing it?" There is a way out. It's not through shame, it's through sight. The moment you stop pretending to be all light is the moment you stop needing others to carry your darkness. The moment you claim your own need for admiration, control, and protection is the moment you stop being seduced by those who demand it from you. The moment you see the narcissist, the manipulator, the cold soul, and say, "I know this pattern, I've worn pieces of it," is the moment you reclaim your power, not to become perfect, but to become whole. Because wholeness doesn't come from denying your darkness. It comes from illuminating it. And when you do that, when you integrate what you once feared, that something beautiful happens. The shadow no longer speaks in seduction or sabotage. It speaks in strength, and you begin to walk through the world no longer afraid of who they are or who you are becoming. Real transformation doesn't begin when you fix your life. It begins the moment you stop pretending you're someone you're not. That's when the shadow rises, not as a monster, but as memory. The old truths you buried, the hunger you denied, the power you gave away to stay lovable, it all begins to stir, and it doesn't whisper, it roars. Carl Jung never promised that integrating the shadow would be gentle. He said it would be a moral problem, a confrontation with your own buried potential, with the very things you've judged, feared, and exiled. Because the shadow doesn't just contain your rage or shame, it contains your truth. The instincts you silenced, the intelligence you downplayed, the beauty you dimmed to make others comfortable, the boundaries you crossed to keep the peace. It contains gold. And if you want it, you'll have to dig. The narcissist you hated? They carried your lost voice. the one that could say, "I matter" without apology, the manipulator who played you. They held the part of you that's strategic, assertive, and unafraid to name what it wants. The cold one who ghosted you. They mirrored the part of you that turned off feeling because being sensitive was never safe. You don't integrate the shadow by becoming virtuous. You integrate it by becoming honest. It sounds like this: yes, I wanted to be admired. Yes, I pretended to be small so I wouldn't be left. Yes, I've used silence to punish. Yes, I wanted power, not to dominate, but because I once felt invisible. And now, I choose to see, not to be perfect, but to be real. Jung wrote, "The gold is in the dark, and when we go searching for it, we find something ancient. Not just trauma, but capacity. A buried ability to speak without manipulation, to be seen without performing, to feel without crumbling, to say no without guilt, to stand in our own fire without needing others to burn." In Chuck Palahniuk's Fight Club, the narrator creates Tyler Durden, an alter ego who embodies everything he represses: wildness, anger, power. At first, Tyler is thrilling, then destructive, because what is denied always returns. And what returns, when left unclaimed, eventually takes over. That's what happens to all of us. If we deny our shadow, it doesn't disappear. It waits, it builds. And when it returns, it doesn't ask permission. But when we welcome it, when we say, "I see you," it changes form. It becomes strength. Not the strength to dominate, but the strength to stay soft. Not the strength to control, but the strength to choose. Not the strength to mask, but the strength to reveal. And this is what makes the shadow sacred. It's not here to ruin you. It's here to remake you, to show you who you are when you stop running, when you stop trying to be only light. When you reclaim the very things you once feared would make you unlovable. And suddenly, the narcissist is no longer your captor, they're your clue. The manipulator is no longer your predator, they're your mirror. The psychopath is no longer your ghost, they're your edge. You begin to recognize yourself in every person who once hurt you, not because you are them, but because the line between self and other becomes honest. And you stop needing to prove your goodness, because now you are integrated. And integration isn't the end of pain, it's the end of pretending. In the next final chapter, we will rise from the descent, but not as someone healed beyond humanity. We'll rise as someone who has become whole through the fire and now carries the darkness, not as a burden, but as a gift. You've made it through the descent, not by escaping, not by explaining, but by surrendering to the truth that what you feared in others was always waiting in you, and that what lived in your shadow was never trying to destroy you, it was trying to return home. Wholeness doesn't look like perfection, it looks like contradiction held in love. It's the capacity to feel envy and still choose generosity, to feel rage and not collapse into it, to feel numb and still stay. Carl Jung wrote, "To confront a person with their shadow is to show them their light, and not a sanitized light, not a curated one, but a light born in the belly of truth, a light that burns away illusion, a light that says, 'This is who I am, and I am no longer ashamed of it.' The mirror no longer distorts, the mask no longer binds. The wound no longer whispers betrayal. Now it becomes the place where light enters," Rumi said. The wound is the place where the light enters you, and that is not poetry, it is instruction. Because the pain you spent years trying to numb was never just pain, it was a portal. And through it walked the parts of you that were waiting to be seen. So now you look at your reflection and see all of it, the parts that needed too much, the parts that played too small, the parts that tried to be good by being invisible, the parts that became dangerous only because they were unloved. And you say to them, "I know you now," not to erase them, but to walk with them. This is the final act of integration, to stop being a divided self, to stop being at war with your instincts, to stop outsourcing your darkness to other people, and instead carry it as your own strength. This is what freedom feels like, not lightness, but weight, the weight of self-knowledge, the weight of dignity, the weight of being someone who no longer needs to punish others for the pain they never learned to hold. And now something opens. You stop idolizing those who appear confident but are hollow. You stop chasing love that feels like performance. You stop tolerating silence where truth should be. Because you've reclaimed the pieces of yourself that were once scattered across lovers, leaders, and losses. You've come home. So if this journey gave you something, if it showed you a piece of yourself that you once feared or hated or tried to deny, let it not end here. Speak, comment. Tell someone what part of the shadow you are finally ready to stop running from. Share this with someone who keeps repeating the same pattern and calls it fate. Remind them that it's not fate, it's a message, and now you can read it. You are not perfect. You are powerful, not because you have no darkness, but because you have chosen to hold it in the light. And that is what makes you whole.